For decades, the story of the global economy was defined by one undisputed engine. Factories across China, packed with millions of workers, turned the country into the world's absolute center for low-cost mass manufacturing. This chart shows the result of that industrial boom. Tracking China's GDP from the 1990s through the 2010s, you see a massive, continuous upward curve driven by double-digit annual growth. Over that exact same timeline, hundreds of millions of people escaped poverty. But today, if you read through macroeconomic forecasts, the tone is entirely different. Analysts are now asking if the world's second-largest economy is losing its structural advantage. The engine is hitting heavy friction. Growth is slowing to more moderate levels. The domestic real estate market is struggling with weakened demand, and Western countries are steadily raising tariffs and export controls. The era of easy, construction-led expansion has reached its limit. China is now navigating a structural pivot that defies the simple binary of growth or collapse. Planners in Beijing are attempting to re-engineer the economy from the ground up. It is a high-stakes transition that will force the entire global economy to adapt. The friction slowing down the old model starts here. For decades, the one-child policy steadily reduced birth rates. By 2022, multiple demographic studies concluded that China's population had officially peaked. Today, fewer young workers are entering the labor force, while the number of retirees continues to grow at a rapid pace. For a country that built its wealth on endless pools of cheap labor for mass manufacturing, a shrinking workforce directly limits industrial output. At the exact same time, the real estate sector, once a primary driver of the national economy, has stalled out. Major property developers are facing deep financial difficulties, and overall housing demand has noticeably dropped. With human labor becoming more expensive and real estate construction grinding down, the two foundational pillars of China's economic rise can no longer generate sustainable growth. International corporations are watching these domestic pressures and the rising trade tariffs, and they are reacting by adopting what is known as a China Plus One strategy. Corporations audit supply networks to identify single points of failure, materials sourced exclusively within China. Next, the map expands to secondary manufacturing hubs in Southeast Asia, India, and Mexico. Finally, they relocate final assembly to these new hubs to bypass export tariffs. You can see the direct result of this shift in countries like Vietnam, which has experienced a massive boom in low-cost electronics assembly as factories absorb the overflow. But while these alternative markets are successfully capturing low-end jobs, they don't have China's massive internal infrastructure, its deep web of interconnected suppliers, or its sheer geographic scale. And the reality is, Beijing is largely allowing those low-end manufacturing jobs to leave. They are deliberately pivoting their resources toward advanced automation and robotics. The state is financing an intense strategic shift toward technological self-reliance. That means pouring capital into artificial intelligence development, semiconductor research, and next-generation engineering systems. You see the physical output of this strategy in the automotive sector. Chinese firms now dominate the global manufacturing of electric vehicles, as well as the dense supply chains required to build the batteries that power them. They hold a parallel advantage in renewable energy, having built and deployed solar infrastructure on a scale unmatched by any other country. The transition is deliberate. China is trading its historical role as the producer of cheap consumer goods for a dominating position in the high-tech industries of the future. This creates a grand contradiction, a country facing severe domestic drag while simultaneously extending its lead in critical future technologies. For the US and Europe, this forces a difficult reality. They face aggressive high-tech competition and a complex process of decoupling deeply integrated supply chains. Nations like India and Vietnam are now absorbing thousands of low-end manufacturing contracts leaving Chinese shores, using this influx to scale their own industrial capabilities. But for the broader global economy, the risk is clear. As global trade fractures into politically divided blocs, the friction of moving goods increases, which ultimately drives up costs for consumers everywhere. Global power dynamics for the next century will be determined by a single factor: whether China successfully navigates this high-stakes shift into advanced manufacturing.